We know a lot about the heart now. We know about its chambers, and we know about how it contracts, and we know about its electrical activity. We also know the path that blood flows. And so you are memorizing this. I hope you've got it memorized. Now let's talk a little bit about all of the highways and city streets that make up that part of this transportation system that is your cardiovascular system. When you are learning anatomy of the human cardiovascular system, you'll learn the parts of the heart, and the parts of the heart are important. That is the power system for making this transportation system run. And then you'll learn the names of some of the big arteries and veins. And so it's easy for us to assume that because arteries and veins, that we can point to them and they get names, that they must be super important. I'm not going to say they're not important, but from the point of view of this transportation system, the arteries and veins are like our freeways. If you want a truck to be able to get from the warehouse to someone's home to deliver a package, you definitely want to get them on a freeway as much as possible because it'll get there fast. So when the heart wants to deliver oxygen to cells, it sends it down an artery and smaller arteries and ultimately arterioles so that it can get there fast. However, even FedEx or UPS or anyone, they do not deliver product on the freeway, right? There's no one standing on the side of the 605 freeway that's waiting for their package. Packages get delivered after the trucks have gone onto city streets and maybe very, very small streets. That's where the packages actually get delivered. And in this transportation system, that is the cardiovascular system, the only place that things get actually delivered or picked up is in blood vessels that are called capillaries. Capillaries. So the arteries, they're like highways, veins, they're like highways, capillaries. This is actually where things get dropped off and picked up. And our way of saying that in physiology is capillaries allow for the exchange of substances, oxygen, glucose, carbon dioxide, between the bloodstream, the blood, and the tissue cells, the cells that make up all of your tissue. So the only place where things actually get picked up and delivered are in the capillaries. Now, arteries and veins, they have got specific definitions. And one of the definitions of an artery, it is a blood vessel that is carrying blood away from a ventricle, right? So all of this is carrying blood away from a ventricle. That's the aorta and then smaller arteries. Veins are bringing blood back to an atrium. That's what a vein is. Now, the fact that this is the definition is what leads to that awkward situation where you are supposed to remember that the pulmonary arteries have got blood in it that is low in oxygen, high in CO2, and so it's depicted as blue, and pulmonary veins have got blood that is high in oxygen, low in CO2, so it's depicted as red. And I'm sure at some point you would have said, why don't these anatomists just get off their high horse and go ahead and change the name of the pulmonary artery to the pulmonary vein? There's a reason why we don't. This is the reason. Arteries and veins are not just defined by how they are carrying blood. They're certainly not defined by what color the blood is. Arteries and veins have got an entirely different job to do. Inside of arteries, the blood is under a lot of pressure, and that pressure is really trying to stretch or even break that artery. So blood inside of arteries, let's go back, like here in the aorta, the pressure inside of there, even if you've got normal blood pressure, goes up to 120 millimeters of mercury. And so that blood vessel, it needs to be made strong, okay? What about veins? This is the largest vein of the body, the vena cava. What's the blood pressure inside of there? Keep in mind, in your aorta, even when you're healthy, it goes up to 120 millimeters of mercury. So what do you want to guess for the vena cava? You want to guess 100, 50, 5 millimeters of mercury. That means that the structure of an artery needs to be tough enough, like a really, really tough fire hose, right? It needs to be made strong. Whereas for a vein, you could just make a vein out of a hefty bag, right? There's almost no pressure inside of it. Now, there's another thing that arteries need. Arteries need to be stretchy. So you might know how to take your blood pressure, right? Not your blood pressure, your pulse. You might know how to take your pulse. And when you take your pulse, you just put your fingers right there on the artery, and you feel the artery kind of going boom, boom, boom. What is it doing? It's stretching and snapping back, stretching and snapping back. Every time your ventricles contract, they send out a pulse of blood, and then the ventricles regroup. So all of your arteries stretch when that pulse of blood comes out, and then they regroup. By the way, inside of your left ventricle, pressure doesn't go 120/70, 120/70. In your left ventricle, right here in your left ventricle, it goes 120/0, 120/0. That would not make it very easy to stay conscious. So it's a good thing that our arteries, when they capture some of the energy from the contraction of the heart as they stretch, and then as they regroup, they smooth out the difference in pressure inside of your arteries. So arteries need to be strong, they need to be stretchy. Veins have got a different problem. Veins have so little pressure inside of them that they need to have these things inside of them known as valves. This should remind you of something. The tiny vessels that are called lymphatic vessels, they also have valves. And the way the blood gets back to your body in veins is largely the same as the way lymph goes back to your heart in lymphatic vessels. And that's with the thoracic pump and the skeletal muscle pump. Oh, and gravity drains it out of your head. So arteries have to be strong and stretchy. Veins, they got a really easy job to do, but they need valves in them. And that is why, even though the pulmonary artery has got blue blood in it, it has to be made strong and stretchy, so it's technically an artery, and we're not just being stubborn. Capillaries. Capillaries are incredibly small. How small? If you were looking through a regular light microscope, in order to see a capillary, you would have to go down all the way to 100 times magnification to be able to see a capillary. They are that tiny. The diameter of an entire capillary is about the same as one red blood cell. If there was a red blood cell in here, it would be about the diameter of that capillary. And how many capillaries do you have? I couldn't even begin to guess. Capillaries are very close to each other in net-like constructions that get called a capillary bed. And the distance from one capillary to another capillary is about 2 to 4 cells distance. So they're very, very close to each other. They are made out of simple squamous epithelium. A while ago, I made you memorize that simple squamous epithelium was used wherever we're going to rely on diffusion to transport substances across. And I made you memorize that the alveolus, the air sacs of the lungs, are made out of simple squamous epithelium, and capillaries are as well. It's going to all come back and be useful. Here is one depiction of a capillary through a light microscope. And you can see this is the diameter of the capillary, and that's the diameter of a red blood cell. Simple squamous epithelial cell. So any oxygen that is on this red blood cell, it would jump from the hemoglobin that it's carried on to the membrane, to that membrane, and then to that membrane, and then to that membrane, and it would diffuse its way across. Now, let's go back here. Capillary walls are thin and leaky. Sorry, this is covered to varying degrees. Thin and leaky to varying degrees. Varying degrees means some capillaries are ridiculously leaky and some are just kind of leaky. Talking about the leakiness of capillaries and why that is important is something I'd like to put into a single video. So we're going to stop here, pick up in the next video.